Welcome to Shir haShirim class number 72. We are in chapter 8 of the Song of Songs, about to begin verse 11. So we are 4 verses from the end. And I actually prepared to go all the way to the end, but it's deep. We want to sink our teeth in, so we're not going to rush. This class is brought to you by the Seattle Kollel. If anyone would like to donate, the web address is Seattle Kollel, SeattleKollel.com, and you can find a donate link over there. What other cool promotions can I do now? I have an ArtScroll affiliate link for people who like to shop at ArtScroll Publishers, artscroll.com/Rebbi Rafi, REBBI RAFI. That's my affiliate link. If you use that link and shop at ArtScroll, I earn a percentage from that, so that helps me. And what else? I don't know. I'm glad to be here. Let's go ahead and start the class. Okay, I'm going to put the text up on the screen. And you know what I should say? Let me dedicate this class in memory of my grandfather, Mordechai ben Eliyahu HaKohen. His yard site was yesterday. His yard site was on Shabbos. The yard site means the anniversary of the day that he passed away. We remember departed souls on those days, and we try to do things to bring merit to their souls. So let's have in mind my grandfather, Mordechai ben Eliyahu HaKohen, as we learn this class. Trying to think if there's any other timely announcements, but nothing's occurring to me right now. So let's take a look at the text. All right. This is towards the end. I'm going to go back up to last week's, the last verse we did. We did 2 verses last week, but I'll just review it so we kind of have a feeling for where we left off. Everyone is invited to chime in at any time with questions, comments. If you're live in the studio, if you want to be live in the studio, there should be a link in the description of this video. There's definitely a link on my community tab on my YouTube channel. And so you can join in, or you could comment directly from YouTube. And I'll see your comments there. If you're on Facebook and you want to comment, you just have to go to StreamYard.com and allow permissions for me to see your comments on Facebook, and I will see them here. Okay. If for any reason the text disappears without me realizing it, please notify me so I could make it reappear. I'm looking at the text, so I only see what I see. I don't see what you see. Okay, now in verse 10, chapter 8, verse 10, which is what we saw last time, it said as follows. It says, Ani choma, I am a wall, v'shadai kamigdalos, and my breasts are like towers or fortresses. Also, yisi ve'enav kemotzeis shalom. Then I was in his eyes like one who finds peace. And what we explain that to mean that in the previous verse, in verse 9, which pays to go back to just to understand that, is that God was conferring with his heavenly court, the angelic ministers, to ask whether or not he should redeem Israel. And they seem to answer, they say, Im chomahi, if she is a wall, nivna ala tiras kasef, we'll build upon her a silver tower, a silver temple, silver fortress. If she is a door, then we'll build upon her wooden boards. And so we said basically, if she's a wall, that she remains steadfast in her loyalty to Hashem and to the Torah. And specifically, Rashi says in the commentary that she does not intermarry, which is very interesting. Again, it's mind-blowing to understand that Rashi's writing in the 11th century when intermarriage was not at all a threat of the Jewish people. Jews were discriminated against. We were forced to live in ghettos. There was all kinds of humiliating laws that our host countries in the diaspora subjected us to, persecutions, killings, massacres, crusades. Rashi lived during the time of the crusades. You know, it's not like we were making nicey-nicey with the Gentiles, or they were making nice with us. And yet he seems to project that in this song, which is speaking of the end of the exile, the test of the Jewish people would be remaining strong as Jews, remaining Jews, not converting and not intermarrying. And it's exactly what we face today is the mass assimilation and intermarriage of the Jewish people that is literally bringing the Jewish people into a state of oblivion, that Jews assimilate into the surrounding cultures. They abandon their Judaism. They abandon their observance of the Torah, their relationship with the Holy One, blessed is He. And as a result, their children or their children's children or their grandchildren are intermarrying, or they themselves are intermarrying and no longer identifying as Jews within a few generations. And many millions of Jews are going lost from our people in this way. And that's a statistical fact. And somehow Rashi, the commentator, had the prescience to see this in the poetry of King Solomon's song, even in his own century. So it's quite remarkable. So if she'll be like a wall, if she'll be strong, then we'll build upon her the fortress of silver, meaning that we will bring about the redemption and the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, and etc. But if she's like a door, that Rashi says, she swings open and allows intermixture, come in, come out. She's going out to those nations. She's letting those nations come into her. Then we will build upon her wooden boards, meaning Rashi says that we will put rotting wood upon her, and the rotting wood will rot her further. In other words, if she wants to go, we spoke about this last time, wasn't last week when we last met, maybe 2 weeks ago, but if she wants to go, we'll help her along. If she wants to be faithful, we'll fortify her more. And the way a person wishes to go, that's the way that Hashem leads them. So when we get to verse 10, which we read last week, she says, I am a wall, ani choma. I am a wall, and my breasts are like fortresses. She talks about how the Jewish people fortify themselves in the study halls, in the synagogues, and again the imagery of the breast, meaning the nurturing of the people, the mother's milk, the Torah that guides us in our proper lifestyle. That's like the mother's milk, and it comes to us through the fortresses. The fortresses we saw earlier on in the poem are the houses of Torah study. Then I was in his eyes like one who finds peace, meaning that's how God will see me, as one who is fitting in his eyes and deserving of the redemption. So we get to verse 11, and we'll begin with the next verse. If anyone has any questions or comments until now, please let me know. Okay, let's go ahead. Verse 11. This is very beautiful, like the whole book is beautiful. Kerem haya lishlomo biva'al hamon, nosan es hakerem lanotirim, ish yavi bifiryo elef kosef, which means as follows. Kerem haya lishlomo biva'al hamon. Shlomo had a vineyard, and Shlomo, we know, which is literally Solomon, right? It's Shlomo, King Solomon. We know from the very beginning of the Song of Songs that Shlomo in the poem is a metaphor for God himself, because the name Shlomo means peace belongs to him. Shalom, shalom. The peace belongs to him. And we said that is a metaphor for God himself, the one to whom peace belongs. HaMelech shahashalom shalom, the king to whom peace belongs. So this king of peace, that's God himself, had a vineyard, a kerem. And this vineyard was in Baal Hamon. Baal Hamon literally means Baal is a master, and Hamon means a multitude. In the master of the multitude. However, it could also mean, as Rashi will say, I'll give you a sneak peek, that Baal Hamon means it's a metaphor for Jerusalem. Shehi Rabas Am v'Hamon Rav, which was a place of a great multitude of people. So the Baal Hamon, a Baal doesn't necessarily have to mean a person. Could even mean a place. The so-called master of multitude means a place that was filled with a multitude of people. And not only that, the metaphor is even more beautiful because here Rashi says Baal. What is the meaning of the word Baal, which usually means master, but not always? He says Lashon. You find it. Lashon Mishor. This is a word that also refers to a mishor. A mishor from the word yashar in Hebrew. Yashar means straight. A mishor means a flat land, a field. A field is also called a Baal. And he quotes a verse in Joshua that is describing geography. And it says, Mi Baal Gad bivik'as halavanon. From a place called Baal Gad in the valley of the Lebanon, the valley of Lebanon. So there was a place in a valley called Baal Gad, and in the valleys you had these flat areas which were used for growing, for fields. So that a field or a flat land that's down in the bottom of a valley, not up on the mountain, but down in the valley where it's flat, is called a Baal. So a Baal could refer to a field. So here we're in the poem, it's talking about a vineyard that was in Baal Hamon. He planted a vineyard in, so to speak, the field of Hamon, the field of the multitude. And that is a parable to Jerusalem, and the vineyard itself, I'm giving away a little bit, is a parable for the Jewish people. Rashi says here, Keramaya Shlomo, Solomon, Shlomo, the king of peace, God himself, had a vineyard. Zuknesis Yisrael, this is the congregation of Israel. Shenamar, and he quotes a verse in Isaiah, which I'd like to visit, as it says, Ki cherem Hashem tzavakos beis Yisrael, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel. So Isaiah tells us in his poetic, metaphorical language that the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and that's the imagery, the same imagery that Solomon is using. Now, just to clarify confusion, yes, Solomon lived long before Isaiah, so it's not like Solomon read the book of Isaiah and borrowed his poetry. If anything, you could say the other way around, that Isaiah borrowed the poetry of the Song of Songs, and he was using it interpretively to say, what is the vineyard of God? It's the house of Israel. It's like Isaiah is the key, is the deciphering key to understand the Shir haShirim. And that's, in fact, how Rashi uses the entire Tanakh, the whole corpus of Scripture, as he reveals to us in his commentary on verse 1. As you recall, that he says the title of the book, Shir haShirim, the Song of Songs, doesn't just mean that of all the songs, this is the greatest. This is the song of all songs. But rather, this is a song that is composed of other songs, that Solomon drew, is that the right past tense verb? Drew from the many books of Scripture, which are each called a song, as Rashi tells us over there. And from those songs, he composed a song that was a tapestry of all the songs. Therefore, it is the Song of Songs. Now, you'll ask the question, but Solomon came first, so how could he read the book of Isaiah and incorporate his words? So we said it was Solomon with his prophecy, with his divine inspiration, was able to look into the future and draw from these holy writings that would be. Okay, but in other words, that the vineyard of, so to speak, Shlomo is the nation of Israel, and he had it in Baal Hamon, this place of a great multitude, which is Jerusalem. Nasan es hakerem lanotirim. He gave the vineyard to the guards. A noter is a guard. He gave the vineyard to the guards. Ish yavi bifiryo elef kasef. A man will bring with his fruit 1,000 silver. That's the literal translation of Ish yavi bifiryo elef kasef. A man brings with his fruit 1,000 silver. So altogether, Shlomo had a vineyard in a field, the field of the multitude. He gave the vineyard to the guards. A man would bring with his fruit 1,000 silver. Okay, what does that mean? We established the vineyard is the people of Israel. The what did I say? The field is Jerusalem. The field of the multitude is Jerusalem, the city of a great multitude. I'm thinking of the verse in Lamentations in Eicha where he says, it starts out and he says, how Eicha, how did it become that the Rabasi the city of Rabasi of many people, became what it became, desolate and destroyed, etc. So, fine. That's Jerusalem. Now, I want to, even before I go further, I want to explore this passage in Isaiah about the vineyard, because it's very, very beautiful. This is a passage in Isaiah chapter 5, and I'm looking now at verses 1 through 7, which is a very famous section of Isaiah. It's the parable of the vineyard. It's the parable of the vineyard. Any questions or comments? Once again, everyone is welcome. The parable of the vineyard is as follows. He says, now I don't want to go through the whole text, that's long and it'll take a long time, but he says, let me sing now to my beloved the Shir, the song of my beloved in his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard. It says Bekeren ben Shaman, in a corner that was ben Shaman. It was full of, shaman could mean shemen oil or like shuman fat, which means my beloved, this is the prophet is talking about his beloved. Dodi in Isaiah, there is the same, my beloved is the same as Dodi, my beloved in the Song of Songs. He's talking about God, but it's a parable. He says, my beloved had a vineyard in a corner that was very fatty. That means he planted his vineyard in the most rich earth, the most fertile land. He planted it. It said, and he encircled it with a fence, and he removed all the stones from it so things could grow. You have to take away all the rocks so that the ground can be used for planting. And he planted it sorek. It says sorek is like the very best quality of plantings. So we've seen sorek before. I'm not going to go back there, but Rashi says an interesting thing. Sorek, even though if you see the way it's spelled here, it's sin resh kuf, but it's spelled chaser. That means it's spelled in a diminished form. The full spelling of the word sorek would include a letter vav, which has the o vowel sound. Sometimes that letter can be removed and the pronunciation remains the same. However, you might imagine that there is sort of an invisible letter vav there. And Rashi says, if so, the word sorek has a numerical value of 606 because the letter sin is 300, the letter resh is 200, which equals 500, and the letter kuf is 100, which equals 600. And when you add that vav in, that's invisible here, but it typically would be there. The so to speak, the correct spelling would be with a vav. That's another 6. So it's 606. What's the significance of that? Is that mankind has, so to speak, 7 commandments, the 7 laws of Noah. And what was the planting of the vineyard of the Jewish people is that God selected Israel and he gave them the Torah with an additional 606 commandments for a total of 613. As everyone knows, the 613 commandments of the Torah, which include the 7 laws of Noah. So he took a nation that was among mankind commanded in 7 laws, gave them the Torah with 606 additional commandments. And so that equals the word sorek, 606. He gave them 606 additional commandments. Sorek. It's very beautiful. Anyway, it says, and he built a fortress in the center, or a tower in the center. There's that imagery again of the tower. It's like the guard tower, the watchtower over the vineyard. And he also built there a wine press, put a wine press over there. And he intended to make grapes, but even after he chose the best land and he girded it off, he fenced it in to protect it from outside elements. He removed all the rocks, anything bad from inside. He planted sorek, the very best quality branches, with the Torah, the 613 commandments. He made a tower inside. We could see that's the temple. And the wine press is the altar, where the libations, the wine libations were poured, Rashi says. And he wanted to make grapes. He wanted that what should come out of such a place is the highest quality fruit, the highest quality product. However, Vayaz Ba'ushim, this vineyard, after all the work that God put into it, produced sour grapes. And this is Isaiah's parable for the sins of the Jewish people in the land of Israel with the temple that God intended for them to produce good, and they produced evil. He said, and now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge now, shiftu na, judge now between me and between my vineyard. I told you a story about a vineyard. It's like when Nathan the prophet comes to David after his act with Bathsheba, and he tells him the whole story about the rich man and the poor man. And the rich man had many sheep, and the poor man had only one that he loved. And the rich man had a guest, and he wanted to feed him a good meal, but rather than take one of his own numerous sheep to feed him, he said, why should I take one of mine when I could take one of my neighbors? And he takes his neighbor's sheep and murders it and serves it to his guest. And this was a parable for David and Bathsheba. It was another man's wife, and he had the man killed, and he took the wife for himself. So he tells him in a parable, and he says, now David, you judge the case and tell me, what is this man deserving? And David, not knowing it was a parable, he judges him very harshly. And then Nathan turns to him and he says, you are that man. And David immediately says, I've sinned to God, and he repents. So, and Nathan immediately says to him, he says, your sin is forgiven, right? So there you see the efficaciousness of repentance, even without a sacrifice. Very important point. However, here he tells him the parable. My beloved made this vineyard, and it produced, so I want you to judge between me and between my vineyard. Now he's speaking in the first person. It's like God's voice coming out from the parable. You people of Judah, people of Jerusalem, judge between me and my vineyard. Who's right and who's wrong? What does this vineyard deserve? He says in verse 4, what more should I have done for this vineyard? Is there anything I didn't do? Is there anything I left out? Is there any way that I was deficient in the way that I cared for this vineyard? Anything I didn't do? He says, why is it that I hoped and I aimed to make grapes, and this vineyard made sour grapes? He says, and now I shall tell you in verse 5, what I will do to my vineyard. I'm going to remove its protection, and it's going to become destroyed. It's going to become infested with foreign beasts. They're going to come and devour it. Its fence shall be breached, and it will be trampled. And I shall make it desolate. It will not be pruned. It will not be lo ye'adir. It will not be tended. And it'll become overrun with shamir, vishayas. Some say this means thorns and thistles and briars and whatever. Rashi says the shamir is a type of a worm. It's a whole other story. It's going to become overrun with, worms that are going to eat it all up, and desolation. And I shall command the clouds not to rain down upon this vineyard rain. And then in verse 7, he reveals the meaning of the parable. It says, Ki cherem Hashem tzavakos beis Yisrael. That's the verse that Rashi quotes. For the vineyard of God is the house of Israel. Ve'ish Yehudah, and the men of Judah. Natasha Ashuav, God, or rather you could say, Ve'ish Yehudah Natasha Ashuav. God planted the men of Yehudah, Sha'ashuav. Sha'ashua in Hebrew, it means in modern Hebrew, a sha'ashua means a game. He planted it like a game, like his game. That means like the object of his delight. God planted the house of Israel and the people of Yehudah like the object of his delight. And this is so beautiful. This verse is, I find, to be one of the most moving verses. It's tragic. It's sad. It's heartbreaking. But the language of Isaiah is so beautiful here. You can't help but be moved. Listen to these words. Vaikav lemishpat v'hinei mispach. He hoped, God hoped, lemishpat, for justice, v'hinei mispach. Instead of mishpat, he got mispach. He hoped for justice, and behold, mispach. Mispach means like a disease, right? But look at the poetry. The word mishpat in Hebrew is spelled mem shin pei tet. Mishpat, justice. I wanted mishpat, and what grew instead was one letter off, because mispach is spelled mem sin pei chet. It's the one letter lower than tet, right? First comes chet, which is the 8th letter of the alphabet, and then tet is the 9th. We were just short of mishpat. I wanted mishpat, justice, but we fell short. From mishpat, we went to mispach, one letter short. And also the letter chet literally means, the name of the letter chet means sin. And not, this is just cutesy, but the letter shin in Hebrew can be pronounced either sh, or it can be pronounced s, and then we call it sin rather than shin. And the letter is identical. This letter and this letter are identical. When we vowelize it, punctuate, however you want to call it, for the sh sound, we put the dot on the right side of the letter. For the s sound, we put the dot on the left side of the letter. That is a cue for the reader. But when it's written in a scroll without any punctuation, without any vowelization, no dots, it's a totally identical letter. It just has 2 possible sounds. So it's the same spelling as mishpat, justice, but off by 1 letter, diminished by one number. And also the letter that's in its place is chet, is sin. So what's interesting is that the shin, sh, becomes also the letter sin, which in English happens to be sin, happens to mean what it means, but that's in Hebrew unrelated. It's just cute. But anyway, but isn't that beautiful? He hoped for mishpat, justice, and instead he got mispach, disease, right? Litzdaka, he wanted staka, which could also mean justice or righteousness or even charity. He wanted tzedakah. And what did he get instead of tzedakah? Righteousness. He got v'hinei tzedakah, also off by 1 letter. The dalet in tzedakah, replaced by the ayin in tzedakah. Tzedakah means an outcry. He wanted tzedakah, and he got tzedakah. He wanted righteousness, and he got an outcry. An outcry means the outcry of the victim, victimization, people being oppressed and caused to suffer, that the powerful and the rich cause those who are poor and underprivileged to suffer. They take advantage of those who are disadvantaged, and they lead to these poor individuals, these victims, crying out to God, help, help, or crying out to their fellow man for help, and their cry is not being heard. I wanted mishpat, justice, and I got mispach, a disease. I wanted tzedakah, righteousness, and I got tzedakah, an outcry of the downtrodden. It's so heartbreaking. It's so tragic, but the language of Isaiah is so beautiful that I felt it was worth going on the detour to see this passage that Rashi is drawing from to explain our passage. He made a vineyard. God made a vineyard. But what happened to the vineyard? He gave over the vineyard to the guards. What does that mean? So we'll look at now here Rashi, the reason you see so much lettering here is that Rashi goes to great length to explain this parable in numerous ways. He gives about 3 different explanations of the parable. One is that it's referring to the people of Judah. And these are not, by the way, exclusive to each other. He says the parable refers to all 3 conditions. One is the people of Judah that's being spoken to. Another one is the people of Israel that already in the time of Isaiah had become carried away by Assyria. Israel was the vineyard. Forgetting words here. Israel was the vineyard, and they produced the sour grapes. And what happened? They became desolate and overrun, and that was Assyria. And then he turns to Judah, and he says, Judah, you also judge between me and Israel. Is there anything I did wrong that I should have ended up with this? Was it my shortcoming? Was it my failing, or was it theirs? And he says, whatever judgment you pronounce on them, you pronounce on yourself, because you are now mimicking and repeating. Judah held out a little longer than Israel in terms of their righteousness. So the ultimate exile of Judah was pushed off by a significant amount of time. But ultimately, their fate was they too were carried away by Babylon. But here Isaiah is warning them, don't you see what happened to Israel? The same thing's going to happen to you. But he even says that the vineyard is a beautiful Rashi. He says the vineyard also refers to Adam Harishon, Adam. Adam, the first man, is the vineyard that God produced. And it says he made his vineyard in this fatty land. This perfect, ideal land was the Garden of Eden. And everything that he did for the vineyard is basically how he set Adam up for success. He removed the stones from him. He says he removed the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, from him. Adam didn't even have an evil inclination. He was so pure, created so pure that God didn't even give him an evil inclination. And the tower that he built inside of him, he says, was the soul that he breathed into him from the high spiritual realms. That's the tower, is his connection to the spiritual realm through the breath of God, the holy soul that he breathed into man. And the wine press was the wisdom, the intellect that God gave him. And again, he hoped for grapes, but he got sour grapes. He wanted man to rise to even greater heights, but rather man failed, right? And so he talks about, again, how this happened to man, and then God tried again with Israel. It was like round 2, with Israel, and they failed. And now round 3 is Judah, who is the remnant of Israel, and that they too are heading in that direction, which sadly they ultimately are do have the first temple, destroyed, and they're carried to exile by Babylon. However, Judah was initially redeemed in the second temple time, although a second failure was followed by another longer, more protracted exile, which has lasted 2 millennia. And here we are in that exile, and here we are talking about it in the book of the Song of Songs. So back to the commentary. I'm just checking if there are any comments or questions, please. They're very welcome. It says, Nasan es haKerem lanotrim. Rashi now explains, what does it mean that he gave the vineyard to the guards? It says, Misara liyad adonim kashim. He gave it over into the hands of Adonim Kashim, means difficult, harsh masters. He gave it to the guards, means he gave over the vineyard to harsh masters. And who are they? Bavel, Babylonia, Madai, Media, Yavan, Greece, the Edom. Edom is, of course, a euphemism for Rome. That the 4 exiles that the Jewish people experienced, the Babylonians, the Madai, Media is paired with Persia, Persia, Media, Greece, and ultimately Rome, right? We went through all these harsh rulers. The Babylonians who destroyed the temple, the Persians who tried to wipe us out in the time of Purim, the Greeks who tried to stomp out Jewish affiliation to the Torah in the time of Hanukkah, and ultimately Edom, who destroyed the second temple, and that is the exile in which we are now. These are the harsh masters that he gave over the vineyard to. Now, here is something as a technical point that a nerd like me gets so excited about. I want to share with you, because in my investigation into this, I discovered something that just was very fulfilling for me, even though this isn't so much a takeaway, but it's very cool. He says, "B'midrash Shir haShirim." This is Rashi speaking. "B'midrash Shir haShirim matzasi mikta smach al notrim alalu." He basically, this is what the words mean. In the Midrash of Shir haShirim, there, and he's citing a work called Midrash Shir haShirim. He says, I found miktasmach, a slight reference to these guards, meaning the fact that I am interpreting the passage of giving the vineyard to the guards, meaning the harsh lords, the harsh masters, and that these harsh masters are the 4 exiles. He says, is there any other source material that supports this interpretation? He says, well, I found in Midrash Shir haShirim a slight allusion to this. And he says, Shehem hamalchuyos, that these are the kingdoms. Okay. Now, when Rashi said this, so immediately I said, oh, I want to look up this Midrash. I always look up Rashi's sources, right? It's an important thing to do. So I said, let me find this Midrash. There is no book called Midrash Shir haShirim that I could find. And as a matter of fact, the only place that I found a Midrash that says these words, that the vineyard given over to the guards, Shehem hamalchuyos, that it says Hem hamalchuyos, these are the kingdoms, is a Midrash called Yalkut Shimoni. Now, Yalkut Shimoni, the name means, literally, it means the anthology of Shimon. Someone named Shimon anthologized many midrashic works. So he took passages from many different midrashic works. And for those who don't know, the midrash is it's essentially a work that records oral traditions of usually homiletic interpretations of biblical passages. And the origin of these oral traditions is very early and ancient and authentic. So many of these oral traditions were later recorded in writing in books called midrashim, from the Hebrew word doresh, which means to seek or to search, because this is an analysis, a deep analysis of the passages to bring out these expanded meanings. So the Yalkut Shimoni is an anthology of many midrashic works where he compiles together many different midrashic sources, and it's a relatively later source. I think it's from around the similar period as Rashi that these sources were compiled. There I saw this interpretation that the guards here are the so-called the Malchuyos, the kingdoms. And when we speak about the kingdoms, which is very vague, which kingdoms? Very consistently throughout the earlier literature, the kingdoms refer to the so-called 4 kingdoms, the 4 exiles: Babylonia, Persia, Greece, and Rome. So you have these vague words. These are the kingdoms, and that's all we find in the Midrash. And Rashi says, based on that, I'm expanding that more specifically to tell you that these are the 4 exiles: Babylonia, Persia, Greece, and Rome. But what's interesting is that he's not citing the Yalkut Shimoni. He's citing a work called Midrash Shir haShirim, which we don't have, or perhaps we do. But I couldn't find this book. Like, let's say if you go to Safaria and you click on this verse and you look at their links to midrashic works, and they have numerous ones, the only one you could find it in is Yalkut Shimoni. So what did I do? I'm like, I want to find this book. I went to HebrewBooks.org. It's a great website. HebrewBooks.org is a library of thousands of old Jewish books, many of which are totally out of print for centuries. And somebody went to the trouble of scanning onto a computer every page of every one of these thousands of books and cataloging them on this online library. So you can search for the title of the book or the author of the book, and it'll bring up whichever titles match. And then you could download as a PDF these books, scanned like a photo of exactly these pages. The problem is the pages are hard to read. These are old books, so they're difficult to read. But if you want to find an old book, very often you can find it on HebrewBooks.org. So I searched up Midrash Shir haShirim, and I found that it's there. So I went and looked it up. So look at this. Look at this. This is the page. It says Midrash Shir haShirim, and it was printed when? It says in the year L'Reach Shemanach Tovim, which is beautiful because instead of using the number for the year, they are using a verse that has the same numerical value as the year. And the verse they're using on this title page is a verse from Shir haShirim. L'Reach Shemanach Tovim, it's way back in the beginning, by the the smell of your fragrant perfume. L'Reach Shemanach Tovim. So you'd have to do the numerical value, and it's on the fly. I'm not good at math. 30 plus 200 is 230, plus 10 is 240, plus 8 is 248, plus 300 is 548, plus 40 is 588, plus 50 is 638, plus 10 is 648, plus 20 is 668, plus 9 is 677, plus 6 is 683, plus 2 is 685, plus 10 is 695, plus 40 is 735. So 735, assuming it's 735, and this year is 783. So about 50 years ago. Is this a 50-year-old book? Unless it's, it has to be. I would imagine, unless I did the math wrong. And also I see that he has these little points on top of some of the letters, but not all of them. I wonder if he's saying only count those letters. I don't know. But it's an old book. As you can see, the print is not so new looking. But what does it say here? It says, Al pi ksav yad yashan noishan. This book was printed based on an ancient manuscript. Ksav yad means literally the writing of the handwriting. It means a manuscript. Yashan noshan. Yashan means old. Yashan noshan means really old. This was printed from an extremely old manuscript, Hanimtza Be'ir Kahir, that was found in the city Cairo. What's the city Cairo? City Cairo is Cairo. Ba'achas mi'a genizos sham, in one of the genizos, as everyone's heard of the Cairo Geniza. A Geniza is a repository for old Jewish books or scripts or scrolls that are not used anymore. We don't throw them in the garbage. We put them away in a respectful storage. Nowadays, we often bury them in the ground and they decompose. However, in Cairo, they discovered a huge, enormous stockpile of old Jewish manuscripts, ancient ones that had been put away by the community there, centuries and centuries ago. And from those manuscripts, many, many works came to light, which Jews had not seen for hundreds of years or more. And today we have access to printed copies of many, many ancient works of Jews who lived long ago that we didn't have for a long time. So he says, we found in the Cairo Geniza this book, Medrash Shir haShirim. That means Rashi had it, and we lost it, and it was discovered in the Cairo Geniza. Now, here's the thing. How did they know this was Medrash Shir haShirim? How did they know that's what this was? Was there a title page that said Midrash Shir haShirim? No, there was not. So how did they know that's what this is? Watch this. I also added for you a screenshot of the Midrash Shir haShirim on this verse that we're learning, chapter 8, verse 11 of Song of Songs, where it says, Kerem haya l'shlomo, Solomon had a vineyard. What does it say there? It says, Nasan es hakerem lanotirim. He gave the vineyard to the guards. Elu hamalchios. These are the kingdoms. So they're those words that Rashi says. It's here in this manuscript that they printed. It's not in any other midrash that we know, except the Yalkut Shimoni, which means that Mr. Shimon, who compiled the anthology of midrashim in medieval times, had this manuscript. But we lost the manuscript after that. until it was found in the Cairo Geniza. So if you look at I circled here footnote bet, and in footnote bet, it cites Rashi's commentary on our verse. Bepirush Rashi, in the commentary of Rashi on this verse, he writes, he gave the vineyard to the guards. He gave them over to difficult masters, harsh masters, Babylonia, Media, Persia, Greece, and Edom. And then they continue to quote Rashi. Rashi says, in Midrash Shir haShirim, I found a slight reference to these guards that they are the kingdom, Shehem HaMalchios, right? And we're all scratching our heads and going, which Midrash is he talking about? He says, so here the editor who writes this footnote says, Lashon Zelo Matzasi, I could not find this language that Rashi is citing from a Midrash. I couldn't find it lo b'chazis. Chazis is another name for a Midrash Rabbah on Shir haShirim. I couldn't find it in the Midrash Rabbah on Shir haShirim. Lo b'zuta, also not in Zuta. I'm not sure what Zuta is. It's another Midrash, obviously. Zulas b'Yalkut. The only place I could find it was in the Yalkut Shimoni, right? Asher hitzil esrov midrashe parsha zos mileches la'avadon. This Yalkut Shimoni saved many midrashim from going lost. Al yidei she'asvam b'Yalkuta, because he anthologized them in his book. He says, Shamnim samamar. There in the Yalkut Shimoni, you can find these words. Gam b'chol hasefer lo matzasi sheichana hasecha min hamidrashim hayidum lanu ad hayom b'shem midrash haShirim. He says, and I never found until today a single midrash that's called Midrash Shir haShirim, right? So he says, since Rashi quotes this language in his commentary and says, I found this in the Midrash Shir haShirim, and we have no other midrash that matches this language except for the Yalkut, the anthology, who obviously had another midrash with this language in it. And in this manuscript that we found in the Cairo Geniza, it must be, he says, that this manuscript is the original Midrash Shir haShirim that Rashi had, that the Yalkut Shimoni had, and that we have never seen since then for many centuries until today. He says, it's clear that we have rediscovered this ancient Midrash that Rashi quotes in this verse, right? Isn't that amazing? Again, it doesn't help us understand the text, but when Rashi says this, and I did this homework and I made this discovery, it was such an enjoyable discovery for me. So I hope I hope my excitement translates a little bit how cool I think that is. But anyway, fine. Let's finish up the verse. So continuing, it said at the end of the verse, what was the end of the verse? The end of the verse was, Ish yovi bifir yo elef kasef. A man will bring with his fruit 1,000 silver. So what is that talking about? So Rashi says, Kol ma sheyachlu ligbos mehen, as much as they were able to collect from them. That means the harsh masters who controlled the vineyard. They wanted to collect as much as they could. They wanted to take advantage and basically, what's the word? Like embezzle. They wanted to steal, however you want to use the word. They wanted to extract from the Jewish people as much wealth as they could, right? To suck us dry of all our possessions. So he says, Gulgolios, ve'arnunios, ve'anparos. That means they taxed us. Gulgolios means a head tax, from the Hebrew word gulgoles, which means a skull or a head. It's the same language that's used in the Torah when the Jews are counted. It says by a head count, so to speak. It uses the word gulgoles, the head or the skull. So they taxed us a head tax. That means every Jew had to pay a flat tax by virtue of the fact that he was a human being living in their domain. So if you had you were a household of 5 people in your family, you had to pay 5 times this tax. Arnunios is a percentage tax of your produce. Whatever you produced, you had to pay tax on that. So it's like income tax. Arnun Yosra is income tax, and Anparus. Anparus is it's kind of like a mortgage tax, but it means it's like a I don't know what the equivalent would be today. I don't think we have it in the United States. In Israel, they have it, but in Israel, in Israel today it's called arnona. What in the language of the sages of yore, arnona meant like an income tax. Is today in Israel, arnona is like if you live in Israel, however big your house is, like however much land you take up in Israel, you have to pay a tax on that. It's like, so it's not a head tax. Doesn't matter how much people are in the house. But if you occupy space in Israel, you pay a tax for occupying space in Israel. So that's kind of what is being referred to as the anparus. So you paid a head tax, you paid an income tax, and you paid a land tax. So what do we call that? There is a property tax, but that's what it is, a property tax. So head tax, income tax, property tax. They taxed the Jews as much as they could tax. Hakol gova mehem lahavi l'soch beisam. They took it all from them to bring into their homes. So that's issue of Ibir Elef Kosef. A man would bring with his produce, with his fruit, 1,000 silver. It seems to now again, it's unclear to me if it means that the non-Jewish governments were bringing the Jewish produce, so to speak, into their house. 1,000 silver, they taxed them like crazy. They took the Jewish property and they brought it into their own houses. Or it's saying that for the Jews, in order for the Jews to be able to bring their own produce into their house, first they had to pay tax upon tax upon tax to the rulers. But either way, the meaning, the message is essentially the same, that the vineyard, the Jewish people, was given over to harsh masters, to the nations of the world who oppressed us, and not just physical oppression, but also monetary, financial oppression to be able to extract from us in whatever means possible our possessions and our wealth. Okay. Everyone's been very quiet. So somebody in the chat is commenting, hello, just added a like. Okay, thank you. We have a few more minutes. I think the next verse is going to take more than a few more minutes, but maybe we'll start it. We'll see how far we can get. Okay, 3 verses to go. No questions or comments? No one has anything to say? You don't have to, but I like the interaction. Verse 12 says like this. It's very beautiful. The truth is, it really deserves time. It really deserves time. Really, really does. We'll see. Okay. Karmi sheli lefanai, ha elef lecha shlomo, umasayim linoterim espiryo. It says as follows: Karmi sheli lefanai, my vineyard is before me. Ha elef lecha shlomo, the 1,000 is for you, Shlomo. Umasayim lenoterim espiryo, and 200 is for those who are guarding its fruit. Okay, my vineyard is before me, 1,000 to you, Shlomo, and 200 to those who guard its fruit. What does this mean? Rashi says, Karmi sheli lefanai, my vineyard is before me. L'yom hadin yeviem HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'mishpat, on the day of judgment. So again, we're talking about essentially the end of days. On the day of judgment, God will bring them to judgment. He will bring these harsh masters to judgment. V'yomar, and he will say, Karmi, my vineyard, af al pi shemesartiv biyadchem, even though I gave it over into your hand, shelihu, it's mine. Ulufanai ba kol ma shechataftem lachem espiryo, and it came before me, all that which you snatched for yourself, its fruit, its produce, it all came before me. Meaning, You thought I gave over the vineyard to you. That means I abandoned my vineyard. Now it's a melee. Now it's a free-for-all. Now you're the masters to do whatever you want, but you don't understand. You were supposed to be the guards. You were supposed to be the caretakers. You were supposed to keep them safe in the meantime during the exile. So you thought I abandoned it, but no, that vineyard that I gave over to you to be the caretakers, to be the custodians, but you're the custodians for my vineyard. That's my vineyard. And I was watching it the whole time, and I am fully aware of every abuse that you put my vineyard through. That which you extracted from them, not a single bit of it went beyond my vision. I'm aware of it all. So that's the idea of my Karmi Shali Lefanai, my vineyard is before me. Everything they went through in the exile was right in front of my face. Everything you did to them, I saw, and I'm fully aware of the abuse and the crimes that you put the nation of Israel through. Vehem Omrim, and they reply, Ha'elef l'cha shalomo. Okay. The 1,000 is for you. Remember in the previous verse, it says they will bring 1,000 silver for their fruit. They're going to extract all this. 1,000 here is a metaphor for the multitude of money that they're going to extract from the Jews, the extortion. So, okay, that 1,000, l'cha shalomo, it's yours. We give it back to you. Elef hakesef shegavinu mehem hakol nachzir lach. The 1,000 silver that we extracted from them, that we extorted from them, we're going to return it to you, right? We accept the judgment. But not only that, what's the penalty for stealing? The thief has to pay a fee. He has to pay a penalty. Umasayim lanotrim espiryo, and another 200, which is, by the way, a fifth, which is the penalty in the Torah if a person steals from sanctified property, what's called hektish, something which is dedicated to the temple. And a person steals property that's dedicated to the temple, he has to return it and add a fifth to its value. So here, the Jewish people is sanctified to God, and they stole the Jewish people's property. So now it says they return the 1,000 plus another 200. They add on to it a fifth. It's exactly parallel to the law in the Torah of returning a stolen sanctified property. So what is the 200? It says, V'od nosif harbi mishalanu. Don't worry, God. Not only are we going to return what we stole, but we're going to, so to speak, pay interest on it. We're going to add to it. We're going to add from our own possessions that we didn't steal. We're going to add from our own onto the Jews. It's almost similar to like in Egypt, that when the Jews left, the Egyptians gave them clothing and jewels and gold and silver, etc., and riches and wealth. We're going to, when we give the Jews back to you, we're going to return them in an even higher state than we got them. L'rashehem v'chachmehem, we're going to give to their leaders, to their wise ones, ke'inin shenemar, as it says, and here he quotes another passage in Isaiah, which is a messianic passage, tachas hanachoshes avi zahav, in place of the copper, tachas hanachoshes, in place of the copper, avi zahav, I shall bring gold. And that's Isaiah chapter 60, verse 17. So here I really wanted to delve into chapter 60 because it's so gorgeous that you could just kvel, as they say in Yiddish. You could just plots from how ecstatic and beautiful these passages, but it's 9 o'clock. So maybe we'll look at that next week. But where it talks about the Messianic era, and it describes how the nations of the world will bring the Jews out of the diaspora, and they'll carry us back to our land, and they'll bring with us riches that they're going to dedicate to the service of God in the land of Israel and in the Jerusalem and in the temple. The whole world will know the knowledge of God, and they'll all come to serve God. They'll all come to recognize God. They'll all come to recognize that the people of Israel were the emissaries of God, the harbingers of God, and they'll put Israel on that pedestal, and they'll bring them back, and they'll dedicate and donate and contribute of their own wealth to enhance and to build the service of God in Jerusalem, and to replace all the damage that was caused over the years. So part of that prophecy is tachas anachoshes, in place of the copper, they'll bring gold. If I could just go, it's a whole chapter that tells like this whole story of how it's going to unfold, and it's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. But just to read that verse in its entirety, right, where it says, tachas anachoshes avizov, in place of the copper, I shall bring gold. V'stachas habarzel avi chesef, and in place of the iron, I shall bring silver. So in other words, we're going to put gold instead of copper. We're going to put silver instead of iron. Right? We're going down. V'sachas ha'etzim nechoshes, and in place of the wood, we're going to put copper. We're going to switch out the wood, which is of a lower quality, to copper. V'sachas ha'avonim barzel, and in place of the stones, we'll put iron. So everything's going to be enhanced. Everything's going to be brought up a level from whatever it is to even higher. Gold in place of copper, silver in place of iron, copper in place of wood, iron in place of stone. V'samti fekudech shalom, and I shall make pekudasech, from the word lifkod, to appoint, to command, those who were the commanders over you, those who had been the rulers over you. I will make shalom. You'll be at peace with them. No longer will you be oppressed by the nations of the world. V'nogesayech tzedakah, and a noges is a persecutor or an oppressor, and your oppressors, those who persecuted, tzedakah, I shall put justice. Now, what does it mean in their place? Meaning either they will receive their just deserts for the oppression and persecution that they enacted against, or perhaps it means that, you know, they will do justice to you, or tzedakah, which could also mean charity. They will contribute charitably to you, or it could mean tzedakah, they will be the recipients of charity from you, because you, Israel, are now going to be in the superior position, and those who had been in the superior position and had persecuted you will now be in the inferior position, and they'll have their hand out to you for help. So whatever these are alternative meanings of what these words could refer to, but the beauty of this utopian state that's going to be that everything's going to be enhanced. Everything's going to be switched from the lower to the higher. And this all, if you read the whole running chapter, this is all going to be brought about by a recognition of the nations, and they're all going to participate in this redemption, so that those who were your masters will now be at peace with you. Those who were your persecutors will now be in a state of righteousness with you, however exactly that will look. So that's the end of the hour. So I'm going to pause over here, but I would really like to see what we decide to do next week. I would really like to look at this whole chapter, which is so ecstatic and so beautiful. This whole picture of the redemption. There's just no words to describe how high emotionally it makes one feel. It should make one feel when reading it. So, you know, if you want to just run over to your Tanakh, your Bible, open it up to Isaiah chapter 60 and read what it says over there. We look forward to it very soon. We have some comments. Okay. I just got here and I'm still trying to figure out what you're talking about. It says the Messiah. Now, for those looking on, I've had some back and forth with this individual, a very nice person. Don't read too much into his title. It's kind of a joke. He's a very clever, intelligent, funny individual. That his moniker here is born out of a certain cynicism that he has developed towards certain religions that push a kind of messianic message, but indeed have no legs to stand on. He's exploring, looking for the truth, and we welcome him to our class. Okay. Dan Smith says this is class number 72. He's responding to the Messiah who said, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, this is class number 72. I have a playlist on my channel, Rabbi Rafi Mallet channel. Go to the playlist tab, go to where it says Shir haShirim, Song of Songs, and it has every class from the first till this one. Go through the entire text. Of course, it'll take you many, many hours to go through it, but I highly recommend it. Take your time; you'll enjoy it very much. It's an absolutely beautiful text and very worth all the time and study. But even without that, hopefully, each module within itself, I give enough context to understand what's being said in this individual lesson. Fitness for the average Joe, David Urbina says, I've been reading the book of Psalms with commentary from Rashi, and it's very eye-opening. Absolutely. The book of Psalms, any of the books of the Tanakh, the Bible, should be read with Rashi's commentary. It's the most classic and the most basic commentary in the Jewish library. Not that it's the only view on scripture, but it is an extremely fundamental one. Everybody should start with Rashi. I'm sure when reading Rashi, you'll find you have many questions, and you should write your questions down and you should ask your questions. But as you eventually learn through more commentaries, you'll find in the tapestry of the different commentaries a holistic approach to scripture, which is very fulfilling. C'est très joli, a beautiful exposition, Rabbi. You always give so much. Thank you. You are welcome. The Messiah says, my name is Chris. Okay, sorry for not referring to you by your name. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for your kind words. You're welcome. Absolutely agree, R.E. Rashi. Yep, that's right. Okay. So that's all we'll cover today. Anyone have any comments, Cliff?
I just wanted to say thank you as always. It was wonderful.
You're so very welcome. So here, here we are at the cusp of the end of the road here. 2 more verses to go. It's the end of the exile in the text. It's the day of judgment. God's bringing the nations to judgment, and he's citing Isaiah of this ecstatic redemption that is to come. What could be left for the last 2 verses? We'll have to find out in the class or classes to come, however long it takes to do the last 2. But yeah, thanks for being here with us. Ronald, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to say this was one of the most easiest ones to not get twisted in. It was so straightforward, this one. That's why I have nothing to say. I often don't, but this one in particular, it was just so in line. But I really loved the story about finding that old manuscript.
Yeah, I'm glad you appreciate
discovering that. I thought that was
scholar.
Really fantastic. Yeah.
It's like someone like me who's like very into studying manuscripts and looking things up and references and sources, so when you see a Rashi like that, you're like, what's he talking about? What is his source for this? And you're looking and you can't find it. And then you find this broken old print, and they said they found this scroll in the Cairo Gniza, and it's the only place that refers to this passage Rashi's quoting. And now we know that we've rediscovered a lost work of Midrash. It's like so satisfying for someone who's obsessed with study like myself. So nice. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I was like, my audience won't appreciate this, but I just want to share
all those little sidetracks you take us on, like the whole lesson so much more fulfilling, because you get, I think I've said that in the past in the written format, you get so much more, a bigger picture, by having those sidetracks alongside the main lesson. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I try to bring in what I think will enhance the text and the lesson. So my hope is that what's meaningful to me will be meaningful to you. So thank you. All right, we have the last comment here. Thank you very much for the answer. I will get some questions and I will put them on the chat. Okay. I'm not sure which chat you're referring to. But in other words, yeah, if you go through those classes, you can leave comments on the individual videos, and typically YouTube will notify me when there's a comment so I can see it and respond, if that's what you're referring to. I completely appreciate your diligence and research. You're welcome. I love it. It's what makes me tick. So, okay. If there's nothing else, I'll say good night to everybody.
Good night.
All right. Bye-bye, folks. See you next week, hopefully.
You got it.
Anyone out there who wants to be in touch, again, in the description of the video is my email address, rabbirafimallet@gmail.com. You can always contact me that way. I'm also on Facebook, and I have a mailing list. If you want to be on it, send me a message, and I'll add you so that you'll get, whenever there's a class, you'll get the links and information, etc. Okay? Yeah. Oh, next time you are live. Oh, I see. In other words, you'll come with your questions to the live class. Okay, you're very welcome to do that. I will try to do the best I can to answer within the time limit. Okay. Bonsoir. Bonsoir. Thanks, Rabbi. You're welcome. Okay. Good night. Yeah, you hang up. Yeah, you hang up. Yeah, you hang up. Yeah, you hang up.